Hey there, I'm Steve, and welcome to Jamsin Entertainment. Welcome to the conversation. Just before we get started, there are many ways you can help. You can like and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. But most importantly, please share this video. Get the word out there as a community. We can talk about all the things that we love. Today on Throwback Thursday, we're looking at Star Trek: The Motion Picture, starring William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, Walter Koenig, Majel Barrett, Persis Khambatta, Stephen Collins, and Grace Lee Whitney, and Mark Leonard. Interesting. He plays one of the Klingons. Fun fact about Mark Leonard, I think only in the classic series he holds the record for most characters / aliens played. He was more than just Spock's father, clearly shown in the casting. Right, before I go into anything, even though I kind of did a little bit, some background. As I mentioned in the Phantom Menace review, I'm relatively certain Star Trek: The Motion Picture would not have existed if it weren't for the success of Star Wars. Because at this time, sci-fi wasn't really profitable in the 70s. With the success of Star Wars, you also got Superman, which is, I know, a comic book, but it's also sci-fi. With that, the motion picture also came out 10 years after the cancellation of Star Trek. And so this movie really was made for the fans. The best way to elaborate on that is how much they show of the Enterprise in the first 30 minutes. Now, it's not the entire first 30 minutes, but they spend probably at least 5 minutes just showcasing the Enterprise. But before that, movie opens up with Klingons attacking a cloud. This is the first time you see Klingons after 10 years, and to the audience then, they look very different. And Roddenberry always had two explanations, which eventually both became true. These explanations were, well, you can either realize that back in the 60s we didn't have the budget to achieve the look that we wanted for Klingons, or something happened to their race along the way where they look like one way, and then something happened where they look like now. And it's in Star Trek Deep Space Nine where they have an episode where they time travel back, and this episode's called Trials and Tribulations, which they time travel back to the episode Trouble with Tribbles, and that's where the crew of Deep Space Nine see the old Klingons, and Worf is part of that away team, and they're like, what happened? And then Worf's response is, something did happen, but we do not discuss it with outsiders. But with the Klingons opening up the movie, it's at this time they very typically just attack something instead of trying to understand something, and that's why they get wiped out. And this cloud is currently in Klingon space. In Star Trek, if you're not familiar, the factions are the Federation, Klingons, Romulans, and those are the three major ones from the original series. I'm going to leave that there, but the cloud is drifting towards Federation space. There's a space station like right on the other side of the neutral zone, which would be the space between the Federation and the Klingons. And the Federation is observing what's happening and what the Klingons are doing. And all of that gets transmitted to Earth, Federation headquarters. Kirk, from the series to this movie, has become Admiral in between, and he's informed of what's going on. And while this is happening, the Enterprise is getting retrofitted. A way to explain to fans why the Enterprise doesn't look like the TV version and why it looks like it is now. Also with that, Star Trek gets a new theme, which later becomes a theme for Next Generation. Now, because Kirk is an Admiral, he doesn't have the Enterprise anymore. It's going to a new captain, Captain Decker, played by Stephen Collins. But Kirk wants the Enterprise back, especially with the information he just received about this mysterious cloud. That doesn't sit well with Decker, and Decker has an argument with Kirk saying, you just want the Enterprise back because you can't let it go. And that's kind of Kirk's thing after the series. Like, he has to be in the captain's chair. And we'll get to a quote of his in one of the later movies. At this point, Spock is not on the ship. He is shown on Vulcan taking steps to complete what's called the Konar, which is the complete purge of all emotions. And if you're not familiar, Vulcans are logic-based beings. Long long ago had a battle within their race of logic and emotions. And at one point they split up. Later you find out that the group that split up became Romulans, just to give you some backstory. But Spock doesn't complete Kohanar. He is troubled by what's going on with the cloud. And the Vulcan matriarch mind melds with him to discover this. And instead of completing Kohanar, he eventually meets up with the rest of the crew. I'm going to leave it there with the story because it's fascinating to watch it unravel. You see the layers get peeled back of this mystery, and the reveal is quite astonishing. And it's something that could happen in our distant future, which reminds me of a saying that Star Trek is our future history, which it kind of is. A lot of things that happened in the classic series showed up in our technology, communicators for example. Eventually we have flip phones and touch pads and stuff like that. As I mentioned, this movie really is for the fans. Part of showcasing the ship, which I get it. And with that, the cast and crew come back and they pick up their characters like they just finished another episode. It's great seeing them all reunited and acting off each other again. It's really like no time has passed. And Bones, he's always the best and funniest character. Especially his dynamic with Spock. Now, being the sci-fi nerd that I am, I can only imagine that the writers, directors, and producers of this also were fans of 2001: A Space Odyssey and Dune, specifically Dune Messiah. The way they're fans of 2001: Space Odyssey is how this movie is a slow burn in unraveling and peeling back layers to the mystery and some of the visuals in this movie. And the way that it's like Dune Messiah, well, I'll just say this because I don't want to go into that specifically because I don't want to spoil anything in Dune for people who are curious, and I don't want to spoil bits of the movie. I'll just say this. Dune is a huge influence on sci-fi, period. What Tolkien did for fantasy, Frank Herbert did for sci-fi. Overall, this movie is very enjoyable, and I do recommend you watch it. As for rating, just like for Star Wars, I'm going to wait on the rating, but it is a good one to watch. Those are my thoughts on Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and live your imagination.